My name's Ben Breen, and I am the Global Head of Construction for PMI. It's absolutely my pleasure to be here today and to present to you the exciting construction initiative that PMI is undertaking with our partners. Just to give you a little bit of background myself, I'm actually a structural engineer from Australia. Have been living in Singapore and working throughout Asia for more than 25 years now, and have been very, very lucky to work on some wonderful projects, some large-scale construction projects, such as the Marina Bay Sands development, which was a $5 billion construction of hotels and convention centres and a casino. And some other really wonderful projects in the region as well. So when I joined PMI, one of the intentions was to come in and look at the offerings that PMI have in the construction industry. And the more that we spoke to people, the more we had members who would say to us, well, there's now a lot of focus from PMI on agile ways of working. That's the new trend. And in fact, they felt that agile is difficult to use in a construction environment, which is obviously a lot more traditional and waterfall type of methodologies. And we then wanted to do something about that. So we started speaking to some of our big partners. We started doing what we do well, which is surveys in the industry, not just within PMI, but going outside of that bubble as well, to find out how we could help and what the pain points are. And we found that the pain points were the same all around the world. You know, the top 10 are the top 10 globally, with the positions changing a little bit from here and there. But it was very clear that there was an issue with efficiency, with communication, with delivery, with productivity, with sustainability, you know, these key elements that kept coming up over and over again. So I'm here today to talk to you about the process that we've gone through, the action that we're taking, and the wonderful things that you can look forward to. So let me just share my screen. Great. I hope you can all see that nice and clear now. So let me jump into the second slide, which is talking about the vision that we created. And that was, as I mentioned, transforming the construction industry by making it more efficient. We identified the key challenges, as I discussed. And what we're proud is that it's designed by construction experts for industry experts. So this is an industry-led initiative that PMI is facilitating and putting together for the benefit of the industry. And what we are doing is introducing several different courses, certifications, and also providing the opportunity for industry engagement. So at the moment, we're looking at about 7 different courses. There would also be some micro-credentials. And at the end of those courses, there would also be an overall certification. Now, we've put together what we call the expert panel, which I'll talk to you about shortly. We are putting together what we're calling a global industry forum, and again, I'll elaborate further. And also putting together thought leadership articles, really trying to mobilize the community in such an important industry. Now, the benefits to you as an individual or to an organisation are very clear as well. It really would transform your team. It would improve efficiency, results, and ultimately profitability. You would be able to get a certificate from a world-leading institution with access to materials and best practices. That's what it'll allow you to do. It'll give you some fantastic networking with your industry peers. And we think this is all these things would significantly benefit organisations all around the world. So we then did a very big survey where we went out to about 40,000 PMP members in the construction industry all around the world. And as I mentioned, we also went out to people who are not not specifically associated with PMI, because we think it's important to have that real, holistic feedback from all sorts of parties. We found that about 72% of projects were delayed, 70% experienced scope creep, and 40% exceeded the original timelines, and 73% of projects finished over budget. Now, if you're in the construction industry, you're probably sitting there and saying, yes, I can see that makes sense. And if you look at it, if for every $1 billion that is spent, 127 million is wasted. And that's higher than other industries, which are down at about 113 million. So construction industry is notoriously very, very wasteful and inefficient. So the research, we also wanted to find out what is important to the people. What is the subject matters that they want PMI to focus on. And the ones that came back, surprisingly, number one was the scope triangle, which we thought was obviously very basic, fundamental in construction, but it is very important. Other things that came back were a bit more complex, like scope and change order management. Communication came out as actually the top relevant subject. Contract process, health and safety, strategic stakeholder management. These are all the key ones that came out of our survey. So they're the ones that we wanted to look at and make sure that we were focusing on. We then wanted to understand what are the important skills that you need in your role today. The top one that came out was leadership. The second was communication. Then we had cost control, decision-making, and contract management. So these are all the key skills. They came out in different orders depending on who we spoke to, but they're the key elements, again, that we knew we had to focus on. Then we wanted to zoom out a little bit. We wanted to look at the construction landscape and particularly what are the effects of COVID-19, because as we know, it's had a major impact all around the world. So it has reshaped the projects. The first one here, you can see that there, in terms of the focus will not be on hospitality, retail, entertainment projects, but governments are spending a lot of money. They're trying to stimulate their economies and make sure that money is being spent to give people jobs and to really fight back post-COVID. The second one is worker safety. A project cannot be done now without considering safety, which has always been important, but it's gone up another notch. There are more virtual meetings. Projects often are still run remotely to a certain extent. And in some ways that's helped because we're getting people from all around the world dialing in, giving their expertise and opinions, instead of previously they would have had to have been sitting in a meeting room with you. So that's actually quite a big advantage. There is a focus towards modularization and prefabrication. Again, that relates to safety, but it also relates to quality control and doing as much as you can off-site in a controlled environment. The internet is very, very important, and sometimes we take that for granted. I'm sure if you're sitting at home and the internet goes down, I know that my children are the first to complain. And it's no different when you're running projects. You know, it's critical to have a strong internet connection, and unfortunately that's not available all around the world. Robots are becoming more important, again, in automating repetitive tasks, making things safer. You know, the use of drones. We're seeing companies like Saudi Aramco who are flying their drones across the oil fields to determine is there any issues and can something be done about it in a remote manner. So again, looking at worker safety. Artificial intelligence is, just getting bigger and bigger. We're seeing augmented reality being used to, let's say something like a Microsoft HoloLens, which is being used for a project in a remote and dangerous location, and having somebody else at the end of the line who can talk through how to achieve something. So more and more we're seeing technology come into play in the construction industry. So we wanted to understand from a statistical point of view as well, just how many companies are adopting these new technologies and new ways of working. We found that 18% of firms are using mobile apps, which again, I find quite surprising and very low, considering how many apps we use nowadays just to run our normal lives. 63% of contractors are using drones. 33% of contractors expect to wear wearable or to use wearable technology in the next few years. And 75% are using cloud storage, as you would expect. But that still means 25% are not, and even that's a concern. So on the digitalization side, we're getting much, much better at gathering data, at using sensors, at using technology to gather data. But 95% of that data that we gather is not being used. So we have to get better at using data. 60% of companies do not have a dedicated R&D budget. And again, that's a concern, because if you're just working on a project and running on the fly, trying to introduce new technologies, chances are it's not going to be successful, or even if it is successful, it probably won't be adopted. So companies need to set aside separate budgets, even the small ones. 59% of companies state that their workforce doesn't have the skills to use BIM. And just to let you know, BIM has been around for 50 years now or more. So this is not a new technology, but it still is something that can significantly contribute to the improvement of a construction project. 19% of UK construction firms say that their projects are entirely paper-based. And again, that scares me. It just shouldn't be that way in this day and age. And 38% of companies cite the lack of staff to support the technology, which is a genuine problem with the lack of good quality, experienced project managers, engineers, architects, etc. So this is just a bit of a traffic light system which shows you where the spends are going to come from. As I said, so institutional with the government spending across the board, really looking to fight the virus outbreak, strengthening their healthcare, new hospitals, investing in the key elements that support the institutional buildings. So that's a big green light in the next few years. Followed closely by infrastructure, energy and utilities. And the ones that you're not going to see in the next few years so much is industrial, commercial, and residential. And then we look at the major construction players around the world. And you can see here is the top 10, with China state construction by far being the largest, with over $200 billion in revenue. And you can see as well that 7 of the top 10 are actually companies from China. And then if you look at the regions, again, China leads the way by far, followed by Europe and Asia Pacific. But the next 2, 3, and 4 down to Latin America are actually very, very similar. And you can see in Latin America, the 3 biggest companies are Odebrecht in Brazil, OAS SA, and Camargo Korea in Brazil as well. And they're big players by world and global standards. And it was important for PMI to understand, the market out there for something that we were looking to create with our partners. And we started off by saying, what is the addressable market? And first of all, according to the US Bureau of Employment Statistics, there's 270 million people globally working in the construction industry. So it's a big number. And approximately 11% of those, or 29 million, are construction workers, project managers working in construction. So that was already quite a big number. But what we found, PMI often talks about the accidental project managers. And that's people that have changed industry. They've gone to where the jobs are prevalent, or certainly moving and upskilling themselves to make themselves more relevant in the new world. And we believe, therefore, that it's an even larger market than this 29 million construction managers. And McKinsey and others have been doing some wonderful reports in talking about what is the new next normal in construction. And the 9 that they've come up with is a product-based approach, specialisation, value chain control and integration. Consolidation will happen, as it often does when the world changes. People need to specialise and consolidate and focus on what they're good at. Customer centricity and branding is something that's really coming out as a strong and important element. And investment in technology, which I'll touch on a little bit later as well. Investment in human resources. This is something we're seeing coming up quite often now. And in fact, PMI does what's called a Pulse of the Profession survey. And last year, we wanted to find out why some companies were thriving during COVID and others were left by the wayside. So what we found is that one of the key elements was if there was a focus on human capital, a focus on their people in upskilling them, making sure they had the best access to training, making sure that there was a big focus on diversity and inclusion so that you're getting the absolute best and widest thought leaders from around the world, all absolutely critical. So that's been picked up here by McKinsey as well. Internationalization is important. There is a lot of companies that are, countries that are really looking internally to what can be resolved locally rather than bringing in experts from overseas, which just may not be able to happen for some time. And the other key element was sustainability, which I think is great. There needs to be more and more focus on this. So those 4 key emerging disruptions can be categorized into industrialization, new materials, new technology, materials that are lighter, faster to produce, better for the environment, and how can they be shipped? What are the logistical elements involved with that? Digitalization of products and processes that I've talked about, smart buildings and infrastructure, using BIM, using AI, et cetera. And lastly, the new entrants. So it's not just our typical sort of competitors that we need to be looking at, but it's people coming in and totally disrupting the industry. Look at things like Uber in transportation, or Airbnb in hospitality. So these are the sort of things that will come in to significantly disrupt the construction industry as well. And McKinsey's findings were that construction itself is the biggest industry in the world and makes up 13% of global GDP. But the construction has really only seen a very small productivity growth of about 1% in the last 20 years. And that's just not good enough. So from 2014 to 2019, private equity firms have raised more than $388 billion to fund the infrastructure projects, with $100 billion of that coming in 2019 alone. So we can see that companies are seeing the importance and raising the profile and therefore the money that needs to go into to fix these issues. McKinsey also found that $69 trillion in global infrastructure investment is needed in the next 15 years to support the expected GDP growth. There will be a skilled labour shortage. For example, in the US alone, 41% of the current construction workforce is expected to retire in the next 10 years, and that will have a significant impact. So these are all the fantastic findings that we can use in determining what is it that we're trying to create that can help address these issues. So then let's talk about what is the construction initiative that PMI is developing. We have worked with some wonderful partners, as you can see here. There's companies like Saudi Aramco that I've already mentioned earlier. We have Jacobs Engineering, Larsen and Toubro, Petronas, US Army Corps, US Department of Energy. We have some in the UK, the Transport Infrastructure of Ireland and AMI. We have BHP and DPR. All of these are just huge global entities in the construction industry. We have also teamed up with two not-for-profit organisations, with the Lean Construction Institute and the Construction Industry Institute, to use their decades of knowledge in making projects more efficient. And we've also teamed up with a company called FTI, who is our consultant working with us to develop this course, or these courses. So as you can see in the middle there, that's one of our virtual Kanban sessions. That's getting together, running through this collaborative digital capability or collaborative framework, and brainstorming key ideas of what we see as important in the industry and what are those pain points, and then how can we address them. So that's exactly what we've been developing in the past 12 months. We also wanted to make sure that from a community perspective, we were creating what we're calling the Global Industry Forum. That's getting together with the best minds in the industry, allowing some brilliant networking opportunities to meet like-minded experts, to challenge the market trends, and to bring in the perspectives before it becomes a trend, so that we know what's going on and we can talk about it and address it in the industry. We wanted to be able to create thought-provoking articles, give people a platform to speak about what they're passionate about, what's working well, what's not working so well. So it's a real knowledge exchange, and it's developing industry champions for change and adoption in new ways of working. So this is something that you can watch out for. This is coming your way very soon. And then in terms of where we landed after all of those meetings and discussions and surveys, the key 7 elements that came out of this, or the 7 courses that we're looking at creating, are shown here. Effective communication in the built environment, scope and change order management, interface management, performance management, execution planning in the built environment, and control and risk management in the built environment. And the last one is technology and innovation. And I don't have the topics there. It's probably quite difficult to read from this small presentation as well, but we're happy to provide more information here. We're well on our way to extracting the best information that we possibly can from the industry and creating courses that address these key elements. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. It was really important for us as well. We've already started doing beta tests in the industry. Before we launch anything, we have to make sure that it's hitting the right notes. It's doing everything that we intended it to do. And we get both positive and negative feedback, which is equally as important. On the positive side, we had a customer satisfaction score of about 82%, which is very high. We had 96% agreeing that the content is relevant to them, 86% likely to recommend to colleagues, 91% agree that the learning is visually appealing. We put a lot of effort into the user interface, making it an online learning environment that was self-paced. We know people are so busy. You can control this, you can do it when you want, and it easily guides you through the course development. And then 96% agree that there are learning takeaways. So that was great for the first course. The second course, as you can see here, was even higher, 83% customer satisfaction score, and a lot of 100% in things like agreeing the content is relevant, agreeing its learning is visually appealing, and it addresses key takeaways. So we're wrapped with that. We got some feedback saying there's certain elements that we can tweak and change. We could make it more practical, which I thought was really good advice, and we're working to do that, to introduce case studies so that you can look at this theory and say, okay, but how does it apply to what I'm doing? And that's something that we're incorporating now, which is significantly improving the course. So it's wonderful. And we have to thank, if there's anyone out there who helped us with this, we truly thank you for making our course even better. So I wanted to drill down into the course syllabus. Now, of course, this is still potentially changing, but this is where we see it at the moment. We want to highlight that in future as well, if people are saying, we love this course, but we'd love it to drill down even further, then that's exactly what we can do. And we want to make sure that this is industry-led. Now, there's a lot of information here. Don't worry. I will just talk through the first one, which is really about effective communication. You can see a little star next to that, which means we're also doing a micro-credential. So you finish this course, it might take a couple of hours. At the end of it, you can do a micro-credential to test your knowledge, which is brilliant. So what we wanted to keep coming back to was the pain point, to make sure that we were creating the right objectives to give us an ideal learning outcome. So as an example, ineffective communication leads to confusion, frustration, distrust, and at a local level, ineffective communication impacts the worker morale and productivity. So that was the pain point. We found that projects that have been done all around the world were being done and delivered in different ways with different communication tools being used. So we created the learning outcome that we wanted is to understand the importance of effective communication, recognize the components in communication, identify the key activities and capture it in a strategy and a plan, keep projects on track, learn about commitment-based management to drive effective action, learn about key things like OBEA and using that as an effective communication tool, learning how to actually listen to what was being discussed around you and respond accordingly, and using collaborative tools and technology. And that's what we've done. The learning outcomes address exactly that. Learning how you'll come out of this, be able to write a communication strategy and a plan to increase the stakeholder buy-in and influencing without having necessarily the authority to do it, facilitating the OBEA sessions and creating that new way of working, and applying the principles of commitment-based management to drive clarity, purpose, decision, and action in construction projects. So that's just to give you an example of the first course. I'm not going to run through all 7 of those, but it gives you a good flavour for exactly the types of things that we are developing with our partners. The second one is on scope and change order management, as I've mentioned. We then have interface management and performance management, execution planning, which is also going to be a micro-credential, and the contract and risk management and technology and innovation. We've actually changed this. Technology and innovation will be a micro-credential because we got a lot of excellent feedback in companies saying, we'd love to understand how to use technology better to deliver our projects. So there we go. That's everything in a summarized version. And if you like, this is what we're trying to achieve here. Transform the built environment by reducing cost overruns, by delivering better outcomes, by increasing productivity and competency of practitioners, and ensuring that there is continuous development of talent pool. So they're the key elements that we're working on. We are genuinely really, really excited about what we're creating here, and the partners that we have involved who have just been fantastic and volunteering their time and effort into creating this. We're excited about it. We hope you are too, and thank you very much.